Who do you think you are? A woman's voice cut through the air, cold and sharp. It echoed down the grand marble hallway. She stood with arms crossed, staring directly at the old man, a black janitor quietly mopping the floor. Next to him sat a little boy, around 8 years old, reading silently. No one spoke for a few seconds. Then the old man slowly looked up and smiled gently. Just cleaning, ma'am, he said softly. Cleaning, while teaching my son Spanish. She emphasized each word, her tone razor sharp. The old man didn't answer, he just lowered his head. Then the boy suddenly spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Gracias, Mr. Elijah. The woman froze, completely speechless. Her son hadn't spoken a single word in over 3 years. And now he spoke, to the janitor, in a foreign language no one had ever taught him. I want an explanation, she demanded through clenched teeth, her eyes filled with suspicion. Mr. Elijah stood up slowly, his voice calm, almost warm. Your son's always had a voice, he said. Just, no one ever spoke his language. I just happened to find a way in. The woman couldn't believe what she was hearing. But from that moment on, everything changed. Because this story isn't about a miracle. It's about a misunderstood child, a man people overlooked, and a mother who had to learn how to listen all over again. Her name was Evelyn Carter, the most powerful woman in the suburbs. Her husband had passed away young, leaving behind a massive fortune. Her estate stretched over 12,000 square feet, complete with a tennis court, a pool, and 3 full-time drivers. But the one thing she couldn't control was her 8-year-old son, Jacob Carter. The boy never spoke to anyone. For 3 straight years, he just stared out the window. She had tried every specialist in the country, from Dallas to New York to California. No one could help except to say he was severely autistic. No communication, no responses, no emotion. But Evelyn refused to accept that. She forced Jacob into 3 therapy sessions a day, strict medication schedules, no visitors except a private nurse. The house was massive but cold and stifling. Even the maids didn't dare to smile. Everyone had their job and very clear boundaries. No one was allowed near Jacob's world. No one, except Elijah Brooks, the new gatekeeper. He was in his early 40s, thin, quiet, soft-spoken. Every morning he greeted people politely. No one replied. No one asked. They only knew he had once lived in Chicago, then moved here after a family tragedy. Evelyn had hired him through a temp agency. His only job, maintain the yard and garage. No one thought much of him until that rainy afternoon in April. Jacob was sitting on the floor by the large glass doors. Elijah was dusting a nearby bench. They didn't speak for 30 minutes. Then Elijah began to hum softly in Italian. Jacob lifted his head slightly, then looked back down. Elijah mumbled a few lines in French. Then he switched to Spanish, calm, melodic, natural. Jacob turned, fully, and stared at him. One look. But Elijah saw something spark. A light. Real awareness. Not the blank stare doctors always mentioned. This was connection. The next day, Elijah did it again. He spoke while he worked, as if it were habit. German, then Japanese, then Portuguese. Jacob began inching closer without anyone noticing. He sat on the floor, right beside Elijah. No words, no contact, just watching and listening, completely focused. That was the day Evelyn came home early. She walked in through the side hallway and froze. Her son sitting beside a strange man, a worker, speaking a foreign language to her child. She exploded. Her voice shook the house. What gives you the right to talk to him? Elijah stood immediately, lowered his head. I'm sorry, ma'am, he said gently. I didn't mean anything. I just noticed he seemed to want to listen. But Evelyn wouldn't hear it. She ordered the housekeeper to call the agency director. She wanted Elijah gone, that night. But just as Elijah was about to leave the house, Jacob turned to him and quietly said, Gracias, Mr. Elijah. Evelyn froze. Her face drained of color, her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at her son, as if seeing him for the very first time. Jacob had spoken, in Spanish, clearly, smoothly, as if he'd practiced for weeks. Evelyn couldn't believe what she was hearing, but her first reaction wasn't joy. It was fear and doubt. She told herself it was just a reflex, a sound, random, meaningless. But Elijah knew better, because Jacob had repeated many words before, fluently, every day after work. Elijah had quietly written everything down, dates, times, reactions. He never told anyone, afraid he'd lose the job. He knew if he spoke too soon, no one would believe him. But in that moment, everything changed. Evelyn was now forced to face a truth she never expected. Her son had always been able to speak. He was just waiting for someone to speak his language. Evelyn couldn't sleep that night. She paced her room like someone unraveling. Thoughts swirled in her head. Was Jacob just repeating sounds, or did he understand? Had her son never been mute at all? The next morning, she called the family doctor, Dr. Renee Foster, a speech and language therapist who had been tracking Jacob's progress for 2 years. She stared in disbelief as Evelyn told her what happened. Jacob had spoken, clearly, in Spanish. He had called the gatekeeper by name, Mr. Elijah. Dr. Foster immediately asked to see him. Jacob was sitting on the floor reading just like any other day. Evelyn walked in with the doctor eyes full of doubt. "Sweetheart, what did you say to Mr. Elijah yesterday?" Jacob didn't answer, just looked down, as always. Dr. Foster calmly pulled out a small voice recorder and placed it on the table. "Jacob, do you know this word?" She held up a flashcard. One word, written in big letters, gato. Jacob glanced at it and whispered, "Gato." Dr. Foster's mouth fell open. She looked over at Evelyn. "Do you know what it means?" she asked gently. Jacob nodded slowly, then pointed to a picture on the page. "It's a cat." Evelyn stood frozen, her breath caught. Jacob understood. He had understood all along, but everyone assumed he couldn't speak, so no one ever waited or listened. Evelyn turned to Dr. Foster, stunned. "How is this even possible?" Dr. Foster sighed. "He may have selective mutism. It's a communication disorder often caused by trauma, sometimes from losing a parent too early or being under intense pressure. Mr. Elijah didn't just stumble into this. He spoke the one language Jacob was willing to receive. This wasn't an accident, Mrs. Carter." Evelyn sank into the couch, hands trembling. "I forced him to speak my way. I never let him choose his own." Dr. Foster nodded quietly. "It's something many parents do. We try to fix instead of listen." That afternoon, Evelyn didn't leave the house like she usually did. She stood by the upstairs window, watching Elijah from a distance. He was cleaning the glass doors, calm and slow. Jacob tiptoed toward him like it was a plan. He handed Elijah a picture book, then sat quietly beside him. Elijah sat down too, opened the book, and began reading softly, in Italian. Jacob repeated every word, clearly, his pronunciation flawless. Evelyn couldn't stand still anymore. She rushed downstairs. Elijah saw her and immediately stood, bowing his head. "I'm sorry if I upset you yesterday, ma'am." Evelyn raised a hand to stop him. "What exactly are you teaching my son?" Elijah looked at her calmly. "Nothing, ma'am. I just speak different languages, and he chooses the ones that feel right to him." Evelyn narrowed her eyes. "Why do you know how to do this?" Elijah was quiet for a moment, then spoke slowly. "Because I used to teach linguistics at the University of Illinois before I lost everything." Evelyn froze. "You were a professor?" He nodded. "PhD in multilingual development and special education. I used to research cases just like Jacob. Then, a scandal in academia took it all away. No one would hire me, so I took whatever work I could, as long as it was honest, and I didn't lose myself." Evelyn stared at him for a long time, then sighed deeply. "Can you help my son? I can't promise anything, but I'll try with everything I have. We'll have to go slow, and he'll need absolute safety around him." Evelyn nodded, then turned away. For the first time in years, she didn't feel powerful. She felt small and full of regret. She had missed the most important 3 years of her son's life because she believed money could fix everything. That night, Jacob fell asleep earlier than usual. He held his Italian book tight and drifted off peacefully. Evelyn stood outside his door, watching, but didn't walk in. She whispered as if confessing, "I'm sorry, Jacob. I truly didn't know you wanted to speak. I never listened the right way. Starting tomorrow, we'll learn together, even if it means starting from zero." The next 3 days passed in silence. No one brought up Elijah. No one mentioned what had happened. But Evelyn began noticing everything. Every little shift in Jacob. He no longer stared blankly into space. There was a quiet curiosity in his eyes now. For the first time ever, he walked to his bookshelf, picked out a Japanese picture book, and placed it gently on the table. Evelyn was surprised but said nothing. She simply sat beside him, turning the pages with him. Jacob stared at one of the characters, then whispered, "Inu." Evelyn glanced down at the picture. "A small dog." "Dog?" she asked gently. Jacob nodded. "It means Inu in Japanese." Evelyn broke down right there at the table. She couldn't stop the tears. Her son was teaching her language. Gently, patiently, she pulled Jacob into her arms, held him tight. Jacob whispered, "You don't have to cry, Mom. I'm okay." Elijah saw the moment from the hallway. He quietly turned away, said nothing. He knew the boy had finally found his light. That afternoon, Evelyn asked Elijah to meet her in the library. She made tea herself and placed it in front of him. Elijah looked at the cup, but didn't sit. "Did you bring me here to fire me?" he asked softly. Evelyn shook her head. No, I'm asking for your help. I've been too proud, too controlling. All I want now is for my son to be himself. Elijah looked her in the eyes. It won't be easy, Mrs. Carter. The mother must be the first to change. We can't ask a child to step into our world if we're not willing to step into theirs. Evelyn nodded. I know, I need to relearn everything. I never want to silence his voice again. From that day on, Elijah wasn't the janitor or gatekeeper anymore. He became Jacob's quiet teacher, his language guide. Every day, 1 hour in the big library. They learned through games, through pictures, through sounds. Jacob began picking up everything quickly. He didn't just speak, he wrote, clearly. Elijah made a tracking chart on the wall, one new word each day in 4 languages, all spelled correctly. Evelyn recorded every single moment, not to show off, but to remind herself, to stay grateful. But not everyone welcomed the change. Sandra, the longtime housekeeper, became suspicious. She saw Elijah in the library every day, saw Jacob laughing even when Evelyn wasn't around. And Sandra didn't like it, not one bit. She began asking around, listening in. One day she eavesdropped on a call Elijah made. He was talking to a former colleague at his old university asking for intervention materials for special needs children. Sandra didn't confront Evelyn. Instead, she sent an anonymous email, accusing Elijah of being a fraud, claiming he was brainwashing a vulnerable child. Evelyn read the email while sitting beside Jacob, who was learning German. She reread it 3 times, then looked at her son, focused, joyful. She quietly deleted the message and said nothing. But she knew she had to protect Elijah, not just with silence, but with action. The next day, Evelyn hosted a gathering at her home. She invited Dr. Foster and several parents in the community. She introduced Elijah as Jacob's language development advisor, then played a video of Jacob reciting the French alphabet. The room fell silent, then exploded into applause. Dr. Foster stepped forward. I confirm this progress is real, she said, and it's something our entire field should be learning from. Evelyn smiled softly, then turned to Jacob. Would you like to say something? Jacob nodded, then stepped in front of everyone. My name is Jacob Carter, he said. I used to be afraid to talk, but I'm not afraid anymore, because Mr. Elijah taught me how to listen, not just with my ears, but with my heart. The room burst into emotional applause. Evelyn wiped her tears openly. For the first time in her life, she felt truly forgiven, not by the world, but by her own son. A week after the gathering at her home, Evelyn received an unexpected phone call. It was from a local news station in Austin. We heard about Jacob's story. Would you be open to sharing it? Evelyn hesitated for a moment, then politely declined. We're not ready to go public just yet. But the news didn't wait for permission. One of the parents at the event had uploaded a video online, a clip of Jacob speaking 3 languages. It went viral, hundreds of thousands of views in just 2 days. Comments flooded Evelyn's social media, praising Jacob, calling him a language prodigy. But others were skeptical, even cruel. No way a selectively mute kid speaks like that. That janitor's manipulating him. This mom is staging the whole thing. The media pressure came crashing in like a wave. Reporters stood outside Evelyn's gate. She had to hire private security just to protect her home. Jacob didn't step outside for 4 days. He was terrified of cameras and strangers. Evelyn knew what she had to do. She invited Elijah to the sitting room. I'm sorry for pulling you into this, she said softly. I never imagined it would spiral this far. Elijah didn't blame her. He just nodded gently. We don't choose when the world sees us, he said. We only choose how we respond. Evelyn thought long and hard, then made a decision. We're going to tell our story, not to be famous, but to shift how people think. Elijah raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? Evelyn nodded. We'll host a community forum. We'll invite therapists, educators, and parents. We'll talk about selective mutism and multilingual intervention. No marketing, no self-promotion, just truth, just what really helped. Elijah agreed and began preparing his notes. Dr. Foster joined as medical and therapeutic advisor. 3 weeks later, their first forum took place at the local community hall. Nearly 200 people showed up. Evelyn stood on stage, a microphone trembling in her hand. I'm the mother of a child who was once diagnosed as mute. I used to believe that my son was broken. I was wrong, and I nearly lost the most precious thing. Not his voice, but his trust. The room went completely still. Then Elijah spoke. Step by step, he walked through Jacob's journey. No magic, no miracle, just patience, and the belief that every child has a voice of their own. Dr. Foster followed, confirming the progress medically and therapeutically. The forum ended in tears and hope. Many parents approached Evelyn, wrapping her in hugs. "Thank you for being brave enough to share," they said. That evening, Jacob walked into the living room. "Mom, I saw your video online. You spoke really well. I'm proud of you." Evelyn pulled him close. "I've made so many mistakes, Jacob," she whispered, "but I'll never leave you alone again." Jacob looked up at her, his voice soft. "You never left me, Mom. I always saw you, even when you didn't understand me." Evelyn broke into tears again. From that day forward, they weren't just mother and son. They were two hearts healing together. 3 months after the first community forum, Evelyn founded a nonprofit, the Jacob Foundation. Its mission was clear: to support children with selective mutism and train parents to truly understand language. Elijah was asked to be the foundation's academic director. He declined several times, reluctant. "I'm just someone who's been broken," he said. But Evelyn looked him in the eye. "That's exactly why you're the right person, who understands the pain of silence better than someone who once lost their voice." The Jacob Foundation began with just 2 small classes, one in the public library, one in a local church. Elijah taught using a method that combined imagery, soft sounds, and flexible multilingual transitions. Dr. Foster trained a small team of emotional support staff. Evelyn handled all funding and logistics. Within 6 months, over 50 families had joined. A little girl named Lily learned 4 languages in just 3 months. A boy named Connor said "Mom" for the first time after 2 years of silence. The story spread quickly across special needs parenting communities. News stations reached out asking to film the classrooms. This time Evelyn said yes. She let them observe the sessions as they truly were. No scripting, no filters, just truth. By now, Jacob was 9 years old and had become a small assistant teacher. He helped others pronounce difficult words, explained meanings using signs and pictures. The boy who once didn't speak for 3 years now laughed and talked every day. A major newspaper interviewed him. "What makes you happiest right now?" they asked. Jacob smiled. "Helping kids who used to be like me. No one understands loneliness like someone who's lived through it." His quote made the front page of multiple papers. The Jacob Foundation began receiving major funding. The University of Texas invited Elijah to share his methods. He stepped onto a stage for the first time in nearly 10 years. No longer a janitor overlooked by the world, but a speaker welcomed with thunderous applause. Evelyn sat in the front row, tears quietly falling. She never imagined that the storm from that one April afternoon would open a new door to a path they never expected. One afternoon, Elijah stopped by Evelyn's office. "I just got a letter from the U.S. Department of Education," he said. "They want to pilot our method." Evelyn's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" He nodded. "They want to begin in rural schools. And if it works, they'll take it nationwide." Evelyn stood up, pulled him into a grateful hug. "We've done something that once felt impossible." But Elijah just smiled. "And it wasn't us. It was the children. They proved everything. All they ever needed was a space that listened." 1 year after Jacob spoke again, for the first time, he was invited to speak at the National Education Conference. He stood tall on the main stage, microphone in hand. "My name is Jacob Carter. I didn't talk to anyone for 3 years. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know who would listen. Then I met someone who understood me, and I realized my voice was never gone. It was just waiting for someone patient enough to hear it." The entire auditorium rose to its feet, applause thundering through the hall. Evelyn and Elijah stood to the side, smiling softly, not a smile of pride, but one of deep, quiet gratitude, because together they had listened to one child, and by doing so they changed an entire little world. 2 years after Elijah first met Jacob, the house that was once silent now echoed with laughter. Jacob had a small circle of friends, each of them unique in their own way. They came over every Tuesday and Friday afternoon for language sessions with Elijah. Evelyn baked cookies for the whole group every time. Elijah told stories in 6 different languages, one after the other. Some of the new kids stayed quiet at first, shy, but just a few weeks later, they were holding up flashcards, writing Japanese letters, clear and proud. No one called them problems anymore. No one whispered behind closed doors, because they had found a voice, on their own terms. One rainy afternoon, Evelyn sat by the window watching the peaceful gray skies. Jacob walked in with a folded sheet of paper. "Mom, I wrote this for Swedish class." She opened it. Read each line, her heart full. "You were the first to hurt me, but also the first to say sorry, and the only one who stayed, even when I shut every door." Evelyn clutched the note in her hands. Tears fell, not from sorrow, but joy. That night, she wrote a long email addressed to herself, a letter to the past. "If I could go back to the day I first found out, I wouldn't rush to find the best doctor. I would sit on the floor next to my child and ask, "What do you want to tell me today?" Our story has no miracle, just slow listening, eyes that spoke when words didn't, and the courage to admit I was wrong. 1 week later, Evelyn received a special invitation. She was asked to speak at the Federal Board of Education. She stood before hundreds of educators, microphone in hand. "I'm not an expert," she began. "I'm just a mother who once got lost. And the one who showed me the way was a janitor." The room fell completely silent. Something had shifted. She continued, "We need to stop trying to fix special children and start learning to listen to them. Stop making them fit into normal. Let them be brilliant in their own way." When she finished, the entire auditorium rose in applause, not for Evelyn, but for the thousands of children still waiting to be heard. That evening, Jacob hugged his mother tight. "Mom, do you think I could speak in class tomorrow?" Evelyn smiled, brushed his hair gently. "Of course." Jacob looked up, a little nervous. "Will you hear me okay?" Evelyn answered without hesitation. "I've never heard you clearer than now." This story doesn't end with awards. There's no headline, no golden trophy. Just a child who once lived in silence, and an adult who once didn't understand. But they met somewhere in the middle, and walked forward together toward the sound of a voice that had always been there, just waiting.